Most people think getting stronger means moving more weight, but what if the secret power to real strength is in not moving at all? Isometrics equal force without movements, and it might be the oldest and misunderstood strength training tool there is. From prison cells to Olympic podiums, from Samson the Great, Samson the Amazing, to the Chinese weightlifting team, this method has created monsters. Hard work seems to be the forgotten variable in lifting circles these days, but for those willing to go deep into discomfort, isometrics are a nuclear weapon. Let's unpack it. So, one of the things is that the misunderstanding of like you don't always need more volume or more weight. Sometimes you just simply need more precision in your training to get a breakthrough. And this is where isometrics absolutely shine. And these have been around forever. It's probably one of the original training methods ever. And I first heard about them from one of my greatest influences, Christian Thibodeau, and he said that if you look back through time, there would have been some sort of caveman. He was probably lifting rocks, and then he was doing a horse stance in his cave or holding his club above his head. And when you really think about it, where back in the day you'd push against a heavy rock, or you'd be lifting things and just holding it, and that's why those farmers had that just pure strength. But if we look at people who started to modernize this or take this and turn it into a training system, one of the earliest people was Alexander Zas, a Russian who was in prison during World War One, and this dude was called the Amazing Samson. Essentially, what he did in his prison cell, he would use the bars of his cell and pull into them as hard as he can, or push against them as hard as he can. He then also used chains and bars to build extreme amounts of isometric strength. And as you can see, he had one of the most jacked physiques, of anyone, which is very, very cool. Then we started to get into guys like Charles Atlas, and he actually started with isometric training before, like we had the likes of squat racks and stuff like that. And he actually sent us out as a mail order course on getting strong. Then we came to a guy named Dr. John Ziegler, and he popularized the isometric rack. And the cool thing about this guy actually invented Dianabol as well, and he was using it for the American weightlifting team. And he actually used overcoming isometrics, or setting up a movable object, so essentially a rack or a pin, and then he'd get his weightlifters to have three positions and just pull maximally against these pins, and they actually completely reduced their Olympic lifting full lifting frequency and volume, and just did these overcoming isometrics, and then once a week they'd essentially max out on their Olympic lifts, and they had freakish results. And these were old guys, in their late sort of years, masters lifters, and they got really, really good results. Now, was it the fact that he was giving them Dianabol? We don't know. Probably was, but it's a really cool example of a different application of what is a very dynamic, fast sport in Olympic weightlifting. Then we look at a little bit more modern. We have the Soviets, or the Soviet sports scientists, guys like Verkhoshansky, modern freaks like Dmitry Klokov, who he's got a 200-kilo pause snatch, absolutely freak of a human. Then we also have the Chinese weightlifters, who are big users of isometric strength, especially through postural strength. As you can see here in the Olympic lifts, that holding that posture, staying over the bar, is one of the most important things. And they would use stuff like weighted isometric back extension holds to build that postural strength. And so they've been an incredible tool throughout history. And it's obvious because they work. Isometrics teach your body to produce more force. They also come with a little bit less fatigue, which means if you're precise with them, can be an absolute great tool. What it helps with is you actually will get up to 10% more activation or muscle activation than dynamic lifts when tested on something like an EMG. You're also going to improve specific strength at 10 degrees of a plus or minus of 10 degrees at a joint position that you hold. And this can be great for things as we go into later on in terms of deleting weaknesses and stuff like that. But it's a great tool to build and strengthen weaknesses. You're also going to get improved motor recruitment without taxing recovery. You can also get increased fast twitch muscle fiber recruitment as well, and potentially develop fast twitch fibers even more. It's a great setup for athletes who are wanting to be even faster. You'll get thicker, more resilient tendons, and they are also great for rehabilitation exercises as well, or programs. But it is a great tool for one, developing those fast twitch muscle fibers, two, thickening and making more resilient tendons, which those two things going together are going to have very powerful, explosive, bulletproof athletes as well. It also helps you to desensitize the GTO, which is essentially the body's internal governor on power, allowing you to access more of your strength. And probably the most underrated aspect of this, it gives you an increased capacity to handle the uncomfortable, because seriously, you'll hate every single second of a isometric exercise, and that's literally the point. Be less bad, get tougher, all of that sort of stuff. So sometimes strength isn't just what you can lift, it's essentially what you can get out of the lift, and isometrics are a great tool. And unlike other methods, isometrics are actually relatively easier to recover from compared to concentric and eccentric muscle contractions, meaning with precision application it can be a great tool to make even more progress, because you're going to be able to get more weakness or specific training in a certain degree of where you need it to be, without causing more fatigue in your program. So it can be a great method to use, and one that's extremely underrated. So let's break it down into application tiers. And so we have different types of isometrics. The first one we're going to talk about is yielding isometrics, and this is probably the one that's most commonly used. Essentially, this is like your pause squats or your pause bench press, or anything that includes a pause snatch, pause cleans, stuff like that. It's actually really great for foundational strength as well. So think about like your push-ups, your pull-ups. We've found that when we give, especially our female athletes, when we give them something like a push-up, pause at the bottom position of a push-up, we find out their push-up strength goes up really quickly, because in general, that bottom position, obviously, more chest, a little bit more of the anterior delt, which is generally the weakness of most women. It will build up that strength very quickly. And, for bodyweight methods, it can be really good, but it's also brilliant for technical mastery on big compound lifts. Using something like a multi-pause or a quantitative isometric in something like a squat, where you pause the first quarter, pause it parallel, and then pause at the bottom, can be a great tool not only for an athlete to feel the positions and get stronger in the positions, but also for a coach to give feedback as well. So yielding isometrics are absolutely brilliant tool for building positional strength, as well as improving technical efficiency as well. Um, Probably one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people go wrong with the yielding isometric is, let's say the bottom of a squat, they treat it as a rest. But what you actually want to do is you want to stay active in the hold. So that you're actually contracting and resisting gravity pushing you down, because it's not a rest, it's an isometric contraction where you're holding tension in that position, and you'll get more out of it if you treat it like that versus a rest. Now, another one, and this is something that has been an absolute game changer, not only for my own training as an older athlete, keeping me in one piece, but it's made a huge difference for our athletes as well. And that's loaded stretching or long duration isometrics. And essentially what you're going to do And something like a loaded stretch, you can take like a deep loaded split squat stretch and you're going to hold it in the deepest range of motion possible. Once again, being active. And this will be anywhere from up to generally 30 seconds all the way up to 3 minutes for a loaded stretch, depending on what you're working on and your different levels of loaded stretching. And this is something I could probably do another video on later on. If you would love me to deep dive into loaded stretching, it is something that I love and it has had huge benefits. Reason why it's so good is it's great for tendon remodeling and hypertrophy near the tendons. You're going to get some really great distal gains. So you're not only going to get thickness and strength of the tendon because they do require a long time under tension with a lot of load to actually develop and create more thickness. But because you're getting distal gains when the muscle is lengthened, you're also going to get strength near the tendon and the muscle. So you're going to experience less tears as well. One of the things that I've seen personally, and that may be an underrated thing of this too, is you get fucking jacked with loaded stretching because as you spend more time contracting the muscle harder, teaching your body to contract those muscles and find more muscle fibers, because after 30 seconds, you're actively shaking like this all the time, you'll find that you get more muscle tone. You just simply look more jacked because the body, this nervous system is used to recruiting those muscles more often. It's able to recruit more of it. And because it develops the fast twitch muscle fibers, you'll just get that thicker, denser look as well. And this is something I recently did a 4 week loaded stretching protocol. Loaded stretches every single day. And after about week two, I was like, holy shit, I just looked like a different person. And I was like, it's probably why, like, I didn't necessarily gain any muscle, but I just looked more jacked due to all of these benefits. Particular things is hyplasia. So as you do these long duration isometric holds, you are actually starting to layer more muscle fibers as well. And this can be something that they haven't done a lot of research on purely because of like who wants to do 3 minutes of a loaded stretch? Not many people. And not many people want to do it for long enough to actually get these sort of results, but they can be absolutely brilliant, which is very cool. The next method is functional isometrics. Okay. So functional isometrics are a brilliant tool for eliminating the sticking point. So what you'll do is essentially set up two sets of pins. One pin about anywhere between 2 to 4 inches, maybe let's say 1 to 4 inches underneath your sticking point. That first pin, you're going to load up and then you're going to press into that second pin as hard as you can for somewhere between 9 to 12 seconds. Generally, what you'll do is you'll take 70 to 90% of your 1 RM and you'll push into that for as hard as you can. If you get 12 seconds, increase the weight just a little bit. If you can only get 9 seconds, that means you stay at that weight until you can hit that 12 seconds, then you increase the weight again. This is absolutely one of the most monster methods. It's actually a reason one of my lifters recently added huge amounts to his deadlift in a short period of time, just by fixing his weakness just off the floor. This was an absolutely monster method that gave us some really, really good strength gains. It's also great to prime the nervous system, and it will build some great strength as well. So the next one is super maximal holds. Okay, and so this is something that I've seen great responses or great gains for people who respond well to what's called the post-activation potentiation effect. So when you have a very heavy load on your body starts to desensitize to that the more you have exposure to it. So let's say, for example, you're going to do a 1 rep max back squat. What you can do is take a super maximal load, so say anywhere between 110, potentially up to 120%, depending on who you are, but generally about 110%. Walk it out, hold it for 10 seconds, re-rack the bar, rest for a minute, and then go and hit your PB. And you'll just find because you've unracked that heavy weight, and you've walked it out, you've felt that weight on your shoulders. When you go back to what is actually your 1 RM, you're like, shit, this feels light. So psychologically, you're really used to, you're like, I can dominate this weight. And then also physiologically, because you've just felt a heavier load, all of those things that inhibiting you in terms of the GTO, you're going to have more of your nervous system ramped up. You'll find that is one of the best ways to absolutely smash a personal best. Weightlifters will do this with a front rack hold for your jerks, back squats and stuff like that, which is absolutely huge. It's also something too, if you're coming into a peaking phase for a prep, you can do heavy walkouts. You can do heavy unracks for your bench press. Doesn't necessarily work for heavy deadlifts. You can do heavy holds, depending on like grip strength and stuff. But I just found bench press, jerk holds, front rack holds, and back squat holds or back holds is probably where you're going to get the most benefit from this. But it is something that will get you very, very strong and psychologically used to heavier weights. Now, the next method, the last method we're going to talk about today is overcoming isometrics. And this is something I've found to be brilliant for athletes. And potential and field athletes in particular. So what we use this for is an overcoming isometric on, say, either a day before they're going to play their sport, or as a midweek sort of extra session that they can get during in season. Because what it actually does is you can set up pins anywhere you want, generally in the sticking point or at the top, or like where they're getting maximum muscle tension. And you can potentiate the CNS, and you can increase rate of force development, activate fast twitch muscle fibers without fatiguing them as well. And so a lot of our athletes, being, explosive, fast twitch type athletes, if they have a day off before they actually play, they actually find that their nervous system turns off a little bit and they're actually a little bit underdone. And we've found that using overcoming isometrics paired with something like an explosive or ballistic movement, maybe a plyometric, is something the day before that just ramps them up, gets them in that little bit more of that explosive type training, and then the next day they play absolutely amazing and they feel really, really good. It's also a great tool for, if you're priming for a max effort lift, you could do, for, let's say you're working up to a heavy deadlift, you could do overcoming isometrics at whatever weak spot you have. Okay, so it could be at the floor, could be at the knee, could be at the hip. Wherever you find that your weaknesses, you can set it up, potentiate yourself for a few sets before you go into your max lifts, and you'll find that your nervous system is just ramped up in that exact position where your general weakness is, and you'll find that you get some really, really good results. Now, where does each of these methods fit within your training cycles, your training years? So in the earlier phases, so your acclimation or your anatomical adaptation phases, where you're getting the body ready or prepared for, heavier training or, longer durations of training. Generally here we'll use loaded stretches or extreme long duration isometrics, because once again, it's going to improve mobility. It's going to improve the body's ability to resist force. It's going to improve tendon thickness, muscle tissue, tissue capacity, and also tissue strength as well. And all of these will set an athlete up for, the coming phases. Then we have accumulation phase. Okay, and so this is where we want to stack on some muscle. This is where we also want to have more volume or more time in certain positions. And this is where we find quantitative yielding isometrics with multiple pauses can be really, really good to improve technique and weaknesses. Also great for hypertrophy as well, because you're just building up that fatigue. And as you fatigue a muscle, you're going to get more growth from that muscle as well. So can be really good in terms of an acclimation phase. This is where you might use something like a 3-pause position bench press. So unrack the bar, quarter of the rep, half the rep just off the chest, 3-3-second pauses, something like that can be absolutely brilliant. You might also use it on something like a deadlift where, on the eccentric, you pause just at the hips, just at the knee, and just off the ground. Can be a great way to build postural strength, and also work on those positions in an accumulation phase. Then an intensification phase. This is where we might use something like an overcoming isometric or a functional isometric to either prime the nervous system or eliminate sticking points. Okay, and so This can be a great time to really iron out and fix those weak spots. Something like a functional isometric in an intensification phase, where you're literally working that position of your weakness with those heavy loads, increasing with some progressive overload systems. You'll find that those weaknesses just disappear very, very quickly as the nervous system and your body acclimatizes to those heavy lifts in your weak spots. So, and then we have a realization phase, and this is where you can use the supramaximal holds for post-activation potentiation. We can also go back to using our yielding isometrics as well, but you might just go for one pause, either at the hardest position, or sometimes we might use something like a front squat where you build up to like a heavy 1 rep max with a 3 second pause in the bottom in a powerlifting program with like a 7 RPE. The reason why this heavy front squat, you're teaching postural strength, postural integrity, and also at the bottom of a front squat, generally you're getting a bigger stretch through the quads, through the hip and knee joints, and through the ankles as well. So it's going to give you almost like a recovery effect as well. So it can be great in that. You can also use pauses as well. Say, for example, if you're using a squat, you can pause at the midpoint, pause at the bottom, pause wherever your weakness is, and work on that technical deficiency or that strength deficiency and whatever sticking point you have. And then we also have our loaded stretching to maintain structural integrity. So, say if you're using something like a heavy wave system for the realization phase, using something like a loaded stretch to keep the hips healthy, to keep the chest nice and healthy, or the chest and shoulders nice and healthy, can be really good to make sure that, as you go into those heavier loads, the athlete stays in one piece, which is very cool. So, probably the biggest thing here is that you know, isometrics are such a underrated tool, but most people skip isometrics because they're not sexy. Often it's hard to see the weight going up, and you may have to, depending on your isometric strength, you may have to drop the weight a hell of a lot. And there's generally no bar bending. There's not as many ego reps. It's just literally just tension, discomfort, and full control, which most athletes or a lot of athletes actually miss. And it's something, if you invest some time in, it's going to make you extremely powerful. It's going to remove your weaknesses. It's going to make you more bulletproof. It's also going to develop, those tissue qualities that'll make you more fast, more powerful, and able to recruit more of the muscle that you've already had. So if you can use these, you'll be controlled in chaos. You'll have strength that sticks, and if you can dominate the pause, the lift becomes yours. I've also got, if you want our isometric programming, I created a quick PDF that will show you exactly how we program one of our programs using this. Just comment tension in the comments or DM me and I'll send it over. Once again, this is one of the most underutilized tools in modern training, but it's a secret weapon that's been hiding in plain sight. No fluff, no wasted reps, just pure force, just pure potential. And it's a great, great method.